morning, everyone.
Good morning. Good morning.
Should we get started?
Sure.
Great. This forum is about sharing airspace with drones, which we're all doing. Any pilots in here with drones? Part 107? Yeah. John, you're a Part 107 guy, right?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. I don't fly drones, I just fly fixed-wing airplanes for the Northern Air Force Station. Chuck directs them. He was ATC manager here in 2016 and 2017. Saw the tower controllers with the pink shirts were under his direction. And John's got every initial after his name. He's a CFI, he flies an RV-7, flew in the United States Air Force, he's an accident investigator. He flew in major airlines, went back to Iraq for 37 combat missions, and he's the CEO of our company, which is Terror Security. So we'll start here.
Combination walking stick and camera platform.
Right, that's exactly what it is.
Okay, you want me to hold the camera while you do that? I haven't dropped any this week, so
I trust you.
feel free to grab a card if you'd like.
So it looks like I'm having a little technical difficulty with the PowerPoint, so I may jump around a little bit. But this was pardon me just for 1 second.
Name and email, and I have a pen if you want.
There you go. Yep.
Thank you. I need an 11-year-old.
I miss the days of getting up off the couch and walking up to the television, and there were only 3 channels. There's more to watch, it was much easier.
This was an experiment done at the Dayton University. And it shows a collision at 238 miles an hour of a drone. Many of us who fly fixed-wing airplanes were concerned about drones. We're learning at the convention here how many incredible applications there are, but we also want to be safe out there, so we don't want to hit them. So our job at Terror Vigilance is to help keep infrastructure, airports, and the like safe. We've worked with various organizations like the Secret Service Presidential Protection Unit, the FBI, the HRT team, the hostage rescue team. We work with local police and airports, nuclear sites. So today we're just going to give you some real common sense ways of dealing with drones and making your life safer. Let's see if we can move on. We're members of the FAST team. About more than half of our Terror Vigilance team are FAA safety representatives. So we are interested in promoting aviation safety. And we're not by any means anti-drone. We use drones. That's a shot of the HRT group. We were in Quantico, Virginia doing a demonstration with them. We've also done some consulting with Michigan State Police. So obviously all my changes that I made I'm not going to save, so I'm a little out of order here. So pardon me while I look at the screen and see what's coming up. So a criminal gang has used drone swarms to discover an FBI hostage raid. They was a woman that was taken hostage, we thought, in a van, and the so-called kidnapper was viewing the position of law enforcement, what they were doing on YouTube in real time. So he was streaming local news, which was being fed by a drone and a camera, while he was holding this woman captive. So there are some nefarious uses. It's a very small number, but obviously the fleet of drones is growing so large. One of the predictions is in 2023 that the fleet will grow by 68%. Anybody remember who this guy is? He said, trust always, but always cut the cards. So that's what we're trying to do today. We're not anti-drone. We use drones in our environmental services group. We use autonomous drones that fly above the water surface, and also submersibles that take samples of dissolved oxygen, turbidity, or water clarity, and do some high definition mapping. So over half of our team are Part 107 drone pilots. We train them, and we try to pioneer uses for drones. So that's why we call the sharing drones, sharing airspace with drones.
Go through your slides on your own.
So the questions that I think everybody asks is if you're guarding a nuclear site or an airport, is what are we allowed to do from a counter-drone point of view? And how do we start? So those are the kind of questions we're going to try to answer. We use Raptor. The word Raptor is a model to help remind us of the steps that we take. And you might recall, the Japanese pioneered the use of Raptors, or birds of prey. It's one of the first kinetic counter-drone measures. So they would send trained Raptors off to knock down drones, which is a kinetic form of mitigation. We use the word Raptor to remind us of the steps. And the steps that we say are risk assessment. Understand your risk for your particular site. A would be authority to act. What is your authority to act? And what's the airspace situation? Do you have your airspace protected? What's the procedure or protocol? Train and optimize systems and rehearse. So we're going to go through that just very briefly, those steps, and see if they apply. So first is risk assessment. What is your risk? And what's the risk of your site? Insider Intelligence predicts that total global shipments of drones will be 2.4 million next year. The fleet's estimated between 15 to 20 million. So there's lots of drones out there. And even though those that are using them nefariously is very small, and even the clueless and careless are very small, the fleet is so big, there's a lot of chances of a drone occurring. You might remember the situation with McCarran Airport. Have you ever seen the video of McCarran Airport where a young teenager was flying his drone around an Airbus that was landing in McCarran in order to post it on YouTube? So he was just being careless, and his motivation was to be famous or put something really interesting on YouTube and get some likes. But he was flying a drone in the path of an active airline. One of our first site assessments for drone security was at Diablo Canyon. That's a nuclear site in California. We did a site survey, and we then since suggested to them a system of antenna and sensors to put in to track where we get harassed by some environmentalists with drones. first and then putting an airspace restriction over top of the Diablo Canyon facility. So P in Raptor is procedure. Do you have a procedure? In addition, ask your airport. I asked ours. They have a procedure for a gear up failure, for example, on the runway, or if the runway closes, or if there's a flat tire. They have a very definitive procedure. Who's in charge? Who's supposed to do what when? But human factors are very important in drone security. And I asked the same question of our airport recently. Do you have a procedure? What happens if somebody spots a drone? And they couldn't tell me the procedure. There wasn't one. So that we helped develop that procedure for you and ask your airport to have one. But having this plan so that they're prepared for what happens if you see a drone. We have a number of pilots report a drone on final. When you're in a low energy state with your flaps down, slow airspeed, low altitude, that's not the time to be making evasive maneuvers. So you want to be able to see the drone, track it, trace it, and then do something about it. So your security system against drones is only as good as the training of the team. Our group is comprised of professional trainers, both at the university level and the CFISR.
Is that supposed to be changing, or is it just supposed to stay the same?
It's supposed to be changing, but it's not. And I don't know what to do. Let's try.
There, it was just there.
Really? I'll try to reboot this thing. I think it's more important to have.
So where the Raptor model came from, anybody a fan of World War II movies about the attack on Pearl Harbor, whether it's Pearl Harbor, Tora, they all have the same footage in it. We had the latest, greatest radar set up on the hill, and they picked up the attack coming in. They had the data, they had the equipment, but they didn't know what to do with it. They didn't properly interpret it. And that's where this whole idea came from. If you look at the market of what's out there for counter-drone equipment, there's a lot of really sophisticated equipment that'll do all kinds of neat things. But if you're not properly trained in how to interpret it and what to do with the information once you get it, it'd be a repeat performance, I'm afraid. I was telling some of the people there in the front row that I kind of miss the days of having to get up off the sofa and change the television channel manually when there were 3 VHF and 1 UHF channels, and I feel the same way about this sort of thing.
So the steps to take if you're dealing with what we suggest, if you're dealing with a critical infrastructure site or an airport, is risk assessment, then the authority to act in airspace. So get your airspace established as protected, or understand your authority to act if you're protecting a manufacturing facility or a nuclear site. Have a procedure, have a plan, train your people is only as good as the training, and optimize your systems if you're looking for a detection, tracking, tracing system. We test those and have a number of them, and then rehearse. And we'll go through this just a little bit. So we mentioned that shipments are up next year by 67%, which will increase the fleet to somewhere around 15 million drones out there. So we only think that maybe 2 or 3% of the fleet are either careless or clueless, we call them. But that's still a big number. So there's still a lot of people that infiltrate airspace unknowingly. So there's Diablo Canyon, and they were having, they have a road that comes in from the north at the top of the screen, and people were parking at the end of the road and then flying drones around the nuclear site. And they were also coming in from the valley to the east, and they were taking pictures of license plates of employees and then tracking the license plates of the employees. And they were worried about this from a security point of view. This site was being reconnaissance or reconnoitered for a possible problem. I think, Chuck, you were involved, I think, with one of our partners is Aerial Armor, and they do some great work in software. And they were analyzing drone hits in Denver a couple years ago. And they were logging the ID, the forensic ID number of the drone. And they correlated it with bank robberies. And they were finding that drones were being used to surveil a bank about a week before they were hit. So there is some criminal enterprise going on across the country occasionally of reconnaissance of sites for possible future criminal activity. Obviously, correctional facilities are a target when contraband is dropped. One of the worst things to have dropped is actually a prepaid cell phone. Because when somebody can carry out their criminal enterprise from inside a facility with a cell phone, it unlevels the balance of power inside the prison. So, do you have a plan? Do you have a procedure at your site? And then we help train. So we conduct tabletop exercises with fire rescue, tower, medical facilities, first responders, and law enforcement to help them all get in sync on what to do about a drone. So that's one of the services that we provide. So it's a 3-phase training program with basic system operations of your detection system, and then mitigation if it's appropriate, or interoperability. So mitigation is currently under the jurisdiction of the Department of Justice. So most of the systems that are out in civilian hands are not able to mitigate the drone unless you're a Department of Justice employee or certified. Cutting through the clutter of systems, there's about 238 different counter-drone systems out there. And they range from radar to optical, acoustic, and radio frequency, library-based. And so we test those. Chuck and Jonathan are instrumental in testing those personally. And we can help sort through the clutter there. So we also suggest that you rehearse. Our airport, which is Waukesha County Airport, about 90 miles south of here, often rehearse once a year a major incident on the field, and they're very prepared for gear-ups or closures of runways. You might remember Al Haynes. He was down in Hartford, Wisconsin a few years ago, and he gave a talk. It was a blizzard, so there was only about 5 of us, but he credited during the Flight 232 incident the fact that they had just had a major disaster simulation at the Sioux City, Iowa airport. And the Indiana Guard was on hand, and he credited saving 184 people by virtue of having a lot of people very current and trained in a major disaster. So having annual training on either drone incidents or incidents at the airport is important.
I'm sorry, will this presentation be available online?
Yes. So one of the other things we like to think about is what are the assets you have in protecting your airport, and use them to their best advantage. So we would suggest contacting schools or RC model clubs. Those are going to tend to have members that may be flying drones and not understand the rules. You can invite your local press, you can sponsor a drone safety day, or contact your local FAST representatives, which is the FAA safety team. Insurance companies, we publish a white paper occasionally, and which is published by Global Aerospace. There's the AOPA and their ASN program. You might be familiar with that. That's the Airport Support Network. And that they usually have a representative at most airports in the United States. They can help organize, as well as your EAH. So, what I think we would like to do at this point, since we're pretty general about this, is just take some questions, and I'll have John and Chuck help answer it. Is anybody here from either an airport or a critical infrastructure site that's interested in information about protecting those things? What type of place are you from, sir?
Airport.
Okay, which one?
Grand Rapids.
Okay. And do you have a procedure or plan now in place for
Well,
drone settings?
that was one of my questions. How do you determine if you have a drone problem?
Well, occasionally what we'll do is take a sensor system and set it up for you. We've done this for correctional facilities and airports. We set up at Waukesha Airport for the month of December 3 years ago. And during that month, there were over 35 incursions that were inside the 4-mile ring and above 400 feet. So we've got some sensors that will do that, and if you want to contact us, we can talk to you about doing that. And then you can sort of quantify and qualify what kind of risk you have, and sometimes that's necessary. At our county airport, where the funds are controlled by the county board supervisors, this really helped galvanize them to the idea before an incident happened. Have you had incidents with drones at your airport?
Not anymore.
They're hard to see, and so sometimes they're there and just nobody sees them. Yeah.
You mentioned, I think it's the second step of your process, like, you know, what your authority is to act on this. So that's my question. I mean, what is my authority to eliminate drones that are flying in places where I don't want them to be?
I'll talk a little bit about that. So he mentioned Department of Justice, also Department of Homeland Security, Department of Defense, and Department of Energy are authorized. Now, obviously, you're probably not going to have one of those people at your airport. Even local law enforcement authorities, unless they have a sworn officer of one of those 4 federal agencies, don't have the authority to mitigate. By mitigate, I mean shoot it out of the sky, like shoot a bird out of the sky, or some other electronic way of doing that. The technology exists, ways of intercepting and basically taking over control of the drone. They call that mitigation. So the federal government, the FAA in particular, is working through getting that authority out there. It's a very slow process. So there's not a lot you can do other than notify your local law enforcement, try to find the operator. The technologies that are available, depending on which one you go with, range in price from $20,000 up to $500,000. If you want to be able to see every drone out there, there's no one silver bullet. There's a lot of different ways of detecting them. So he mentioned RF, acoustics, and optics. We actually have a slew of camera and radar. But you're talking about a small vehicle, right? We don't know how radar works. So you send out RF, it bounces off and comes back. Radar is just accurate for radio detecting the range, right? So long as you take the signal to get it back. That's how far away it is. Where do we get it? We're sweet. The more expensive technologies incorporate all of that stuff. There's also eyes, guys in the tower, if you're at the tower controlled airport. Pilots, you see something, if you see a flock of birds, maybe you say something to the tower or the FBO or the uncontrolled airport. Somebody else comes behind you can hopefully get that information as well. It's really no different. You see a drone flying around out there at altitudes, in locations. It's possible it's a safety problem. Say something to somebody, see it, say it, right? And that's just the basics, right? There's no cost, that's just people just talking and sharing information with each other. But how do you detect, how do you know if you have a real problem? Look, there are more drones right now than there are registered aircraft, all combined registered aircraft in the United States. The number of drones is just growing up. So it is a threat. It's a new technology. Any technology, there's the potential for great use and potential for using it in a bad way, right? So there were folks that became taxi drivers in New York and then decided to drive on sidewalks and kill people. So we all know that the car can be used in good ways and bad ways. Same thing is true with the drones. This is something the federal government is trying to wrap its arms around and figure out how to get some control over this and have enforcement actions that identify folks who are using drones illegally so that the threat can be reduced or mitigated. But it's going to be a challenge for a while. Yes, sir.
Do you think that once remote ID gets implemented, is that going to be helpful? I mean, it seems like there are the 2 kinds of people here. There are the idiots that inadvertently wander in who may comply with the remote ID rules, and those might be detected. But if you have evil intent, you're just not going to put remote ID on there.
So remote ID is certainly part of the solution, no question about it. You all remember ADSB a few years ago, but it took a little while, but at some point you had to have it, right? If you're going to apply any kind of controlled airspace. So the FAA is committed to integrating unmanned aircraft systems into the national airspace system. Up until now, as we transition and get to that point, the unmanned aircraft systems are basically 400 feet and below. Around Class Delta, Bravo, and Charlie airspace, for those who aren't familiar, how many of you are familiar with the Lance platform, Lance application? A few of you? Okay, if you're not familiar with what that is, it's an agreement between the government and the FAA and just some private companies that are providing that service. But basically, every controlled airport in the country, over 300 of them, had to come up with a map around their Class Delta, Bravo, or Charlie airspace and determine what altitudes would they release automatically without further discussion with the operator. The operators, of course, are 14 CFR Part Level 7 operators, so they have to go through a licensing process. But if they want to operate within the Class Bravo, Delta, or Charlie airspace around an airport, they have to go in this application and make a request for that authorization, referred to as a certificate of authorization or a COLA. And you can have it for a year, you can have it for certain days of the week, certain time frames. I want to operate on Fridays between 3 p.m. and 5 p.m. and on Sundays between 1 p.m. and 4 p.m. for the next 6 months. You know, this is for commercial, for hire and to make money. But let's say you're going to out kind of on the periphery, they're probably going to release 400 and below or 300 and below. Those maps, for those of you who've seen it, they have almost like a checkerboard with a bunch of squares, and it says right in there what altitudes they'll release. As you get closer to the airport, the altitudes are lower, 100 and below. If you're on the approach for one of the runways, it's going to be a 0. But you can still get authority to operate. Let's say the airport wants to hire somebody to come and take some drone footage for the airport. Maybe for a construction project coming up or an airport improvement project. They can still get an authorization, but it's just a little bit more involved process. They'll actually get hands-on rather than just using an automated system. It'll get kicked to the FAA. The FAA will look at it. They'll come out with some provisions to allow that to happen. Basically, it'll be something like, before you fly, you got to call the tower. The tower's going to look at what the weather is, what the runways that they're using are, what the traffic is. And on the spot, they're going to say, yep, go ahead and fly. We'll let you know if we need you to set down temporarily. Maybe we have an emergency coming in down, or a light flight or something like that. And then you can fly again. Let us know when you're done as well.
A little bit of a follow-on. I'm actually working on building a remote ID system.
Okay.
So, the FAA has released their requirements for the system, what it has to do.
Yes.
Can you think of anything that I could build into the system that would maybe be over and above that would help this?
So are you building a system that's going to include location of the controller, location of the drone, altitude?
Well, yeah, that's all part of the bare minimum requirements. But so, I don't know. I mean, maybe that's as good as it gets.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, is there any way I could program it that it would throw up a flag or something like that would?
You can have one that could self-separate from other drones.
No, that's beyond my.
Like TCAS for drones or something.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that I can think of is if you could make it not spoofable, have some kind of unique ID in it that can't be spoofed. That way it would be admissible as forensic evidence, but if it can be spoofed, then who's to say what it was and who did it?
Yeah. I mean, it's part of the requirements. You're going to have an ID that's issued to you that is going to allow the authorities to be able to correlate that number with a person or an
If
owner.
you don't spoof it.
But I don't know.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what we get. Spoofing can be trouble if you're nefarious.
Yeah.
All right, or like you said, they'll just somehow bypass it, or steal your ID and fly their drone with your ID. For the Grand Rapids Airport and back, you'll probably find if you do have drone problems, local law enforcement is hesitant to get involved because they go, no, that's a federal thing. We don't want anything to do with it. That's because in the police academy, one of the very first things they teach you is do not make case law. So they're hesitant about getting spanked in court for doing something wrong. But by talking to them and educating local law enforcement, it is possible, and many municipalities have passed ordinances that don't prohibit drone flying, and they don't allow enforcement against drones, but they include drones in the ordinances that already exist about reckless endangerment, vehicular disorderly conduct, that kind of thing. So there are mechanisms to use where you're not encroaching on the federal turf. If you plan ahead and talk to them and get them on board, and Chuck can talk more about it, but there also are, you know, Steve told you I'm on the FAST team, so I work with the inspectors out of the Milwaukee FISDO. I'm one of their remedial trainers, so if you do something bad, we may meet again. But if there's something really bad, the FAA has their own, I'm going to call them police. Chuck can tell you exactly what they are, and local law enforcement will want to be sure they can coordinate with them so they don't do anything that will run afoul of the people that have the power to enforce the FARs in a criminal sense.
I would just add, if you're not already familiar, if you just go on the FAA website, under UAS or unmanned aircraft systems, and then look at remote ID, you can learn all about it. I think the rule came out, it was effective April 21st this year, but just like with ADSB, there's a period of time before you have to be compliant. I believe it's September 16, 2023. All the details are in there. There's 3 different ways to be compliant. You can buy a newer drone that just comes with it already incorporated in the drone. There's going to be add-ons you can add on to your drone, you know, at a cost that will be in compliance as well. I guess kind of what you're doing, build something like that, and hopefully be able to sell to others and have a business going for yourself. And then there's a third way, I'm going to look at it at the site. But anyway, there you can learn about it that way. To your question, real quick about your airport, do we have a problem or not? We're not the only ones. There's others out there that do this, but you can get. There's a lot of. He's mentioned over 200 companies that are actual manufacturers that are developing counter drone. You'll see it sometimes as C-UAS, so counter unmanned aircraft system. Basically, just there are systems that are designed to identify, detect, and in some cases they have the ability to mitigate, but again, waiting for the government's laws to catch up, if you will. But they have the ability to go in and take control. You can look at the video that's being sent back to the controller and see what they're looking at. Some pretty cool stuff. Some systems will only identify a certain type of drone. How many of you are familiar with DJI drones? It's a Chinese company. They make most of them. About 2/3 of the ones in the market today are DJI drones. But Americans are catching up. They're making a lot. There's a lot of other companies making drones. The drones are really cool. They do a lot of cool stuff. Again, if you're going to use it, you know, legally, incredible technology. The sky's the limit for all the different things that can be done. But if somebody wants to use it for robbing banks or whatever, then you have to find a way to counter that, stop that. But what you could do, for example, we could come in with a manufacturer we work with, just set up a 2-week, 3-week, monitoring period, and just see what happens. And give you some really good detailed information. Heat maps would show where they were detected, when they were detected. Maybe at a certain time of the week, a certain day, a certain time, every week a certain drone shows up in a certain area. Or there's a lot of drone activity in one particular area, no drone activity anywhere else, So maybe it's an area where it's a concern. It's close to the airport, it's on the approach to one of the runways, or maybe it's a little farther away, maybe it's not an issue, that kind of stuff. But at least that's a starting point, to start, okay, what is our risk? Well, we just did some data collecting, we noticed that there's a lot of drone activity, more than we thought. And so that's just a starting point. But again, there's something like that, by the way, is not expensive to do. If you decide later on you want to actually purchase counter drone technologies, now depending on what level of detection you want, there's going to be some expense.
The question about authority to act is a good one. If you're an airport and you have a system that detects and tracks drones, and you can tell where the drone is and where the operator is, you can notify local law enforcement to investigate and often coordinate with that, the operators and just educate them. Because often they're just being careless. They're not being nefarious, but they're just clueless or careless.
Is there any material to help, like small companies? I live in New York City, which is a different thing, but there are a lot of people that have a small $100,000 in Compton, so up in New York, they cannot spend $30,000 system, like 5 people. You cannot monitor every day from activity, but when they go, I want to make sure that they use citation with that.
We're on board with you. The first video that Steve showed you, if you could back up to it, reason I'm mentioning this is the people who did it know what they're doing. And you see the hole punched in the wing, that's simple classical Newtonian physics. And the faster they're going, the heavier it is, the greater the impact force. And if you're talking general aviation airplane and a Phantom 3 or 4, not a very heavy drone, and they're both moving at top speed, you're going to have an impact somewhere between the striking energy of a 50 caliber machine gun and a 20 millimeter cannon, obviously without the high explosive charge going off. But the result's not going to be pretty. It's a rotor blade or comes through the window of a helicopter. I don't know if anyone flies helicopters, but without the pilot moving the controls, they don't stay in the air very long.
I would just add real quick to that too, correct, New York, fireworks show Easter around 4th of July, Fleet Week, right, all around the traffic museum there. Times Square, New Year's Eve, lots of people are gathered. What if somebody weaponized a drone, dropped, something in there? What a lot of organizations will do is just do like a one-off, like maybe for a day or two. Super Bowl, World Series, they all have some kind of technology. The NFL is doing a lot of technology now, but it's just specific times that they're doing it. When the crowds are gathering and somebody wants to get some attention and show something. So you're not talking about 24/7 coverage, you're just talking about a specific period of time when you're most concerned about the threat. Obviously, in New York City, I mean, there's always people everywhere all the time, right? So there's always some concern.
Not for the past 6 months. See, but everything is, and especially in New York City, everything is the biggest, the loudest, it's great. But people live outside of the city, okay? And I fly once a week. And when I do, I have so many drones, so many incidents, and as a company, we can afford a system that would monitor us. And when we do, like, is there a daily rate, maybe some subscription thing?
Yeah, there are. There's some really good companies out there that do subscription types of services. So if you want to just have our card and contact us, we can really get a little more of that.
Also, for you guys, to a package for people like me, how would I deal with my local authorities? Because, the federal law is pretty uniform. Because I try to call them there, because whenever I say this, it's completely uninterested.
They're uninterested because they're uneducated. They don't think it's something that they can handle. So the key to enforcing something like that is to get local law enforcement involved, make them understand that what they do is important in this, write a thorough report, and then forward it on to the FAA. It does have a big stick, because what's the violation up to? $12,000 a crack? It's either $10,000 or $12,000 a crack for an FAR infraction. And it's administrative law, so the burden of proof is on you to prove that you're innocent if they decide to go after you. But the FAA does not have the resources to do it. Most local law enforcement, that's also why they're hesitant. We can't do it, and we don't have the resources to do it. But if you can get them on board and let them see what the danger is, they would probably be willing to help out. Does the department here, you have an aviation department?
For me also, especially in this country in general, that most of the sophisticated drone operators are actually under 25. There's no education in school or colleges that's still playing, stuff like background. There's none.
One other thing too, most of the manufacturers that would offer a subscription service, they understand what the rules and laws are. Here's the cool thing, we mentioned earlier, you need someone from the Department of Justice, Department of Energy, Department of Homeland Security, or Department of Defense to actually mitigate in real time. But you don't need any of that just to collect forensic data that you can share with your local law enforcement, Port Authority, New York City Police, right? So the manufacturers understand that. They're going to give you good forensic information. You're going to have actual, here's the dates and times, here's the drone ID, here's where the control was, all that stuff. And you can get that, you can get text alerts for anybody that's a trusted agent within your organization. So they all get the same ones, they can all, there's a link, click on the link and see it right away while it's still flying. And you can have your contacts with Port Authority or New York City Police say, hey, we include them on the list. If they want to have something for their guys to get a text, they can get it too. And they can have guys on the street go look for the operator right now. days over on 7th Avenue and, 34th Street, whatever.
If we could, we'd like to talk to you a little bit more and understand your situation. Have you been reporting drones, sightings, while you're flying fixed wing?
We start to have our own logs to look for trends, especially in the summer when the Hamptons, which is like the vacation spot, grows in size 300%. So you have all the semi-celebrities flying in and out. Not only do they want their privacy, but it's also the traffic becomes so congested. Everybody wants to see who's coming on lawn, and it's really difficult because most of them they have their own strips, so they're uncontrolled someplace on the side. You have drone flying, nobody's controlling this, nobody is reacting to our, reports that this is dangerous. Forget the pictures, it's just dangerous.
The laws are very varied by locality. I think John here is probably our expert on law enforcement and the application, but if we get some more information from you, I think we can clarify that and who to report them to. Because in many cases, you can't just harass somebody with drones to take pictures or interfere with operations of aircraft.
We had a question from.
Yeah, you asked me when you came around why I came, and I fly a light sport, weight shift controlled aircraft. I'm flying in the same airspace as the drones. I can be down there under 400 feet, so I'm not worried about the enforcement side. I'm worried about how do I share that airspace. And when I'm outside of Class B airspace, I'm not in Class B, but I would like to see some technology that even if it cost me a few dollars, I could put on my aircraft and the drone would see it and automatically avoid me. I can't avoid them, I don't see them. And they don't have eyes to see me, so I would like to see something in that technology. And somebody back here is maybe the manufacturer. I would be willing to purchase something that would send a short range signal out, tells the drone I'm there. I don't want to run ADS-B, but if I did run ADS-B, I expect the drones would see that. But I'm a recreational pilot, and I know the drone pilots that I may meet in the middle of a cornfield or a bean field or something, they may be recreational, following their rules too. But I'm looking for a collaboration between the two of us so we don't have an incident. And it's not something I've had personally happen, but I'm looking to the future a little bit too, as well as what could we do. And as I followed some of the information, I was kind of like, give me a little beeper I can put in, and the drone sees it and says, okay, I got to hover down here for a few minutes.
I think that sort of thing is probably going to come down to shoot, and the remote ID designer may be better adept at explaining it, but the way I would envision it is there are plans to have drone airwaves at the 400-foot level and below, because Walgreens, Amazon, everybody wants to do deliveries and use them, and they're going to have to, on an automated basis, see and avoid one another. So whatever device they use to do that, putting it on a weight shift airplane for people that fly in the same airspace should be doable, but what's going to happen, because remember, we got to deal with the government that it's slow. And the reason I bring it up, there's a lot of people hesitant to try and listen to drones because drones were one of the platforms exempted. Normally in aircraft, anything transmits is fair game for the public to receive. Drones are covered by a wiretapping law. Now, the reason that it's okay to look at DJI drones is if you look at your pilot's operating handbook for the drone, it says right in it, if you fire this up, you consent to us monitoring you. So the wiretap law doesn't apply in that case. And that's the other reason municipalities and local law enforcement are hesitant to get involved. They're worried about being accused of violating the federal wiretapping statute.
Another thing too, for right now, until that technology exists, and I agree that'd be awesome if we had that right now. But just like for you flying VFR in your manned aircraft, you have to see and avoid clouds, all that, right? It's the same thing for the drone operator. They have to maintain visual line of sight. So for example, we mentioned earlier, we fly drones also. We're not anti-drone, we love them. We were mapping the field. We were in an uncontrolled airport down in southeast Wisconsin. And several times, aircraft coming into land, we're in conflict with our drone. So we had to break off our mission, come down, wait till they land, and go back up. We have that responsibility. It's no different than the responsibility you have just flying around in a VFR and aircraft. So again, most people are going to follow the rules, right? There's a small percentage that don't care or don't know the rules. They don't take the time to learn. That's where the real concern is. That's where the threat is. But we don't have control over birds when seagulls and birds fly either, right? So we all know there's some risk out there no matter what. When you fire up a plane and take off, birds could fly into your windshield or fly into your engine or something. You know, talk to guys who landed in the Hudson, right?
We don't take that chance.
Yeah,
We're
there's a little bit of risk, we know that. So, but we're trying to mitigate that as low as we possibly can to keep it safe.
And the key is education, not only for law enforcement, but if you see someone flying a drone, not doing it the right way, talk to them in a nice way and bring them up to speed, because you're helping not only yourself, but them out as well. Education is the key. They can't follow the rules if they don't know or understand them.
If someone spots a drone while flying, what should they do?
Okay, that's a really good question. If you are near an airport, I would certainly give a PIREP and let the ATC know about it. If it's an uncontrolled airport, there's probably an FPO or a local operator with a radio that you can share. After you land, if you see another pilot or something, you're ready to go, let them know, that kind of stuff. Because information is, could actually save lives, right? So let them know. Maybe they'll decide to take it from a runway or be really, vigilant as they're taking off and looking out there, that kind of thing. But again, it never hurts to call your local law enforcement, the sheriff, whoever it is, whoever has that jurisdiction, so they can be out driving around looking. It's their job. They're looking for suspicious activity. There are actual cases. I'll use Fenway Park in Boston as an example. Somebody flying a drone. They had counter technology in place. They located the operator and they went and had a discussion with them. So, again, sometimes it is, that's a case where there's a TFR, but maybe you know they're not supposed to be here, or maybe this guy did, but we weren't party to the discussion. But there's people who are operating legally, and maybe it's a concern for somebody who's taking their limo right out to the Hamptons. They don't want any drones within 5 miles of them or something, but it's somebody legally operating. There's nothing about that. But at least just having somebody roll up in a Suffolk County Sheriff's car and say, hey, what are you guys doing? We see your Part 107 license, whatever. Oh, okay, you guys are good. Just have a good day. Follow the rules, that kind of thing.
Any other questions we can try to answer this morning? Thank you all for coming very much. Sorry about that.
And